The rain had started before dawn and showed no sign of stopping. Marcus Reid sat on the metal bench outside the Salvation Army shelter in Pine Bluff, Oregon, watching water pool in the cracks of the parking lot. His duffel bag rested between his boots, everything he owned compressed into 40 pounds of canvas and regret. Beside him, Atlas sat perfectly still, a Belgian Malinois, with amber eyes that never stopped scanning, never stopped protecting. The dog's tan and black coat was damp from the morning drizzle, but he didn't shake it off. He just watched Marcus, waiting. Marcus was 34 but felt 50. His face was weathered, stubble-covered, with deep lines around his eyes that came from squinting at desert horizons that no longer existed. His dark hair, buzzed short on the sides, showed premature gray at the temples. He wore his old Marine Corps jacket, faded green with a rip in the left shoulder he'd never bothered fixing. His hands, calloused and scarred, held a crumpled newspaper someone had left on the bench. He wasn't reading it, just staring at the classifieds section, the way a drowning man might stare at driftwood. Atlas nudged his hand with a cold nose. Marcus looked down, meeting those intelligent eyes. The dog had been with him for 6 years through 2 deployments. Through the explosion that had taken 3 men from his unit, through the nightmares that followed him home, through the divorce, the job losses, the slow unraveling of everything civilian life was supposed to be. "I know, boy," Marcus whispered. "I know." His phone buzzed in his pocket. The screen was cracked, held together with electrical tape, but it still worked. A text from his ex-wife's lawyer. Final settlement processed. $50 deposited to your account. Consider all obligations fulfilled. $50. That's what remained after everything had been divided, sold, and stripped away. $50 between him and the street. Atlas stood, shaking off the rain in one powerful motion. Water droplets scattered across Marcus's jeans. The dog looked toward the road, ears pricked forward, as if something out there was calling him. Marcus had learned to trust that look. In Fallujah, that look had saved their entire squad when Atlas detected an IED buried beneath a false drainage cover. Marcus folded the newspaper and stood. His knees ached, old injuries that never quite healed. He was about to head back inside when something caught his eye. A small advertisement in the bottom corner of the classifieds, circled in faded red ink by someone else's hand. Estate auction, pilot's property, collapsing structure. Sold as is. Mountain Ridge, 40 miles north of Pine Bluff. Minimum bid, $50. Saturday, 10 a.m. Marcus read it twice. $50. The exact amount sitting in his account. The exact amount standing between him and absolute zero. Atlas barked once, short, sharp, certain. Marcus looked at the dog. "You think that's a sign?" Atlas barked again, tail raised. "Yeah," Marcus murmured, voice rough. "Me too." The auction was held in a gravel parking lot, beneath a sky the color of wet concrete. A dozen people clustered around a folding table where a thin man in a cheap suit shuffled papers with the enthusiasm of someone fulfilling a legal obligation and nothing more. He was maybe 60, with thinning hair slicked back and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. "Lot 17, the auctioneer announced in a monotone voice. "Former property of Captain Edwin Harrow. Deceased. Structure condemned by county inspector. Land value minimal due to access issues and geological instability. Sold as is. No warranties, no inspections." Marcus stood at the back of the crowd. Atlas pressed against his leg. Most of the people here were developers or scrappers, looking for cheap metal or salvageable lumber. They barely glanced at the photos the auctioneer held up, images of a sagging 2-story house clinging to the side of a forested ridge, its roof caved in on one side, windows shattered, porch half collapsed. Opening bid is $50, the auctioneer said. Do I hear 50? Silence. Marcus felt his heartbeat in his throat. This was insane. He didn't know the first thing about construction, about property law, about any of this. But something in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive overseas, told him to raise his hand. 50, he said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. A few snickers rippled through the crowd. One man, dressed in an expensive North Face jacket, with slicked-back silver hair and a Rolex catching the dim light, smirked openly. His name tag read, Donovan Cole, Cole Development. Going once? The auctioneer droned. Going twice. 75. Donovan interrupted, eyes locked on Marcus with cold amusement. Marcus's stomach dropped. He had exactly $50. That was it. Atlas growled low, deep, aimed directly at Donovan. The developer's smirk faltered. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Do I hear 80? Silence stretched. Donovan was still staring at Marcus, clearly waiting for him to fold. But then someone else spoke, a woman in her late 50s, with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing muddy work boots and a faded flannel shirt. 50, she said firmly. The original bid stands. Mr. Cole just tried to jump the process. The veteran spoke first. The auctioneer blinked. Ma'am, that's not how. Actually, it is, she interrupted, pulling out a printed copy of the auction rules. Section 4, subsection B. First verbal bid at minimum holds priority for 30 seconds. You didn't wait. Donovan's face reddened. This is ridiculous. Sold, the auctioneer said quickly, clearly wanting to avoid a scene. To the gentleman? With the dog? For $50? Marcus stood frozen, barely breathing. The woman walked over, extending a weathered hand. I run the feed store in town. Your dog's got good instincts. Marcus shook her hand, still stunned. Marcus Reid. And yeah, he does. Maggie glanced at Atlas, who sat perfectly still, watching Donovan with unwavering focus. Malinois, right? Military? Marines. Explosive detection. She nodded with quiet respect. Then he'll know if that old house is going to fall on your head. Marcus managed a faint smile. Let's hope so. Donovan stormed past them, phone already at his ear, voice low and angry. Marcus caught fragments. Find out everything. Liens. Code violations. Get that property back. Maggie watched him go. Cole's been trying to buy up that ridge for years. Wants to build luxury cabins. That pilot's estate was the last holdout. Why didn't he just bid higher? Marcus asked. Because, Maggie said quietly, he thought nobody else would want it. Marcus looked down at the deed the auctioneer handed him, a single sheet of paper with faded ink and a county seal. His name, handwritten in the clerk's shaky script, next to the words, Owner, Mountain Ridge Estate. Atlas barked once, decisive, as if sealing the deal. For the first time in months, Marcus felt something other than emptiness. Not hope, not yet, but movement, direction, purpose. He folded the deed carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Come on, boy. Let's see what we just bought. They walked toward his truck, a battered 1998 Ford, with mismatched door panels and a tailgate held shut with bungee cords. As Marcus climbed in, Maggie called out, Marcus! He turned. If you need help, she said, Pine Bluff takes care of its own, especially veterans. Marcus nodded, throat tight. He wasn't used to kindness anymore. It felt heavier than scorn. Atlas jumped into the passenger seat, settling in like he'd done this 1,000 times. Marcus started the engine. It coughed twice before catching and pulled out of the lot. In the rearview mirror, Donovan Cole stood beside a black SUV. phone still pressed to his ear. Eyes following Marcus's truck like a predator, tracking wounded prey. Atlas growled softly. "Yeah," Marcus whispered. "I see him too." The rain picked up as they headed north, windshield wipers struggling to keep pace. The road wound into thick forest, climbing steadily toward the ridge. Every mile took them farther from civilization, farther from the noise, farther from everything Marcus had been running from, and toward something he didn't yet understand. But Atlas knew. The dog's ears were forward, body alert, eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if he could already see what waited for them at the top of the mountain. The house appeared through the mist like a ghost clinging to the hillside. Marcus killed the engine and sat there, hands still gripping the steering wheel, staring at what $50 had bought him. It was worse than the photos. The structure leaned slightly to the left, as if the mountain itself was slowly shrugging it off. The roof had collapsed entirely on the right side, exposing blackened beams and torn tar paper flapping in the wind. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets. The front porch sagged in the middle, its railing hanging by a single nail. But there was something else, something the photos hadn't captured. The house was huge, not mansion-sized, but sprawling, with multiple wings and additions that suggested years of expansion. And the setting, the ridge dropped away sharply behind it, offering a view of endless forest stretching toward distant mountains. On a clear day, it would have been breathtaking. Today, it just looked haunted. Atlas jumped out before Marcus could open his door. The dog immediately began circling the property, nose to the ground, ears swiveling like radar dishes. Marcus followed slowly, boots crunching on wet gravel. The air smelled of pine, rot, and something faintly metallic. Rain dripped from broken gutters. A rusted weather vane on the collapsed roof spun lazily, squeaking with each rotation. Marcus approached the front door. It hung crooked on broken hinges, the wood swollen from years of moisture. He pushed it gently. It groaned open, revealing darkness beyond. Atlas was there instantly, pressing past him, body low and tense. The dog disappeared into the shadows, without hesitation. "Wait!" Marcus started, but Atlas was already gone. He pulled out his flashlight, a heavy maglite from his service days, and followed. The interior was a disaster. Wallpaper peeled in long strips. Furniture lay overturned and mildewed. The floor was covered in debris, shattered glass, fallen plaster, water-damaged books. But beneath the decay, Marcus could see the bones of something once beautiful. High ceilings, ornate molding, a stone fireplace large enough to stand in. Atlas barked from somewhere deeper in the house. Not an alert bark, an insistent one. Marcus moved through what must have been a living room, then a dining area, with a chandelier dangling by a single chain. He found Atlas in the kitchen, standing rigid before a door that led downward. The basement. "You want to go down there?" Marcus asked. Atlas scratched at the door, whining softly. Marcus tried the handle. Locked. But the wood around the frame was rotted enough that one good kick, the door splintered open. Stone steps descended into complete darkness. The smell hit him immediately. Damp earth, old concrete, and something else. Aviation fuel. Faint, but unmistakable. Atlas was already halfway down the stairs. Marcus followed, flashlight beam cutting through the blackness. The basement was larger than he expected, and surprisingly dry. The walls were concrete, reinforced with steel beams. At the far end stood a workbench covered in tools, blueprints, and parts. This wasn't just a basement. It was a workshop. Atlas moved to the corner and sat, staring at a section of wall that looked identical to the rest. But the dog wouldn't move. His focus was absolute. Marcus approached slowly. He ran his hand along the concrete, solid, cold, nothing unusual. Atlas barked once, sharp and commanding. "All right, all right," Marcus muttered. He pressed harder, feeling for seams, for hollow spots. His fingers found a small indentation near the floor, a slot, barely visible, filled with decades of dirt. He pulled out his pocket knife and scraped the debris away. A keyhole. Marcus sat back on his heels, heart racing. "What did you find, boy?" Atlas's tail swept the floor once. Approval. But Marcus didn't have a key. He examined the lock. Old. Military grade, by the look of it. Not something he could pick. Not something he could force without destroying whatever was behind it. He stood, dusting off his jeans. "We'll figure it out tomorrow. Let's see what else is here." They searched the rest of the basement. Marcus found filing cabinets filled with aviation manuals, logbooks from the 1,960 seconds and 70 seconds, and photographs, dozens of them. A tall, lean man with a pilot's cap, and a wide grin, standing beside various aircraft, sometimes alone, sometimes with crews, always with that same confident smile. Captain Edwin Harrow. One photo was different. Harrow stood in front of a C-130, but his expression was grim. Behind him, barely visible, were wooden crates being loaded into the cargo bay. The photo was dated February 1975. Saigon evacuation routes. Someone had written on the back, in faded pencil. Marcus stared at the image, something cold settling in his stomach. The look of a man carrying weight no one else could see. Atlas barked again, pulling him from the memory. The dog had moved to the stairs, ears forward, body tense. Then Marcus heard it too. He climbed the stairs quickly, Atlas at his heels. Through a cracked window, he saw headlights cutting through the rain. A black SUV pulled up beside his truck. Donovan Cole stepped out, flanked by two men in suits. They didn't look like lawyers. Marcus's jaw tightened. That was fast. Cole approached the porch, stopping just short of the broken steps. "Mr. Reid!" he called out, voice smooth and practiced. "I wanted to welcome you to the neighborhood." Marcus stepped into the doorway, arms crossed. Atlas stood beside him, silent and still. "Little late for a welcome wagon," Marcus said. Cole smiled without warmth. "I'll cut to the chase. I'm prepared to offer you $5,000 for this property. Right now. Cash." Marcus didn't respond. "That's 100 times what you paid?" Cole continued. "For a house that's about to collapse on your head? Not interested." The smile vanished. "Be reasonable. You're a veteran, right? You've got better things to do than play homeowner with a death trap." I said no. One of Cole's men stepped forward, broad-shouldered, crew-cut, expensive watch. "Mr. Cole is being generous." "I'd take the offer." Atlas growled. "Low. Dangerous." The man froze. Cole raised a hand. "Easy. We're all friends here." He looked back at Marcus. "You should know, this property has code violations dating back 15 years. The county could condemn it tomorrow." "Then let them." Cole's expression hardened. "I'm trying to help you." "No. You're trying to buy land you couldn't get legally." For a moment, something cruel flickered in Cole's eyes. Then the smooth mask returned. "You've made your position clear. I hope you don't regret it." "To do." He turned and walked back to the SUV. His men followed. The vehicle's tires spun in the mud before catching, spraying gravel as it sped down the mountain road. Atlas watched until the taillights disappeared, then looked up at Marcus. "Yeah," Marcus said softly. "He'll be back." That night, Marcus set up a sleeping bag in the one room with an intact roof. A small study on the second floor. He fed Atlas from his dwindling supply of kibble, then sat by the window, watching rain stream down the glass. The deed lay on the floor beside him. $50. Everything he had. Everything he had left. His phone buzzed. A text from Maggie. "How's the palace?" He smiled despite himself and typed back. "Roof leaks. No power. Dog loves it." Her response came immediately. "Dogs know things we don't. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day." Marcus set the phone down and looked at Atlas, who had curled up on the sleeping bag. Head resting on his paws but eyes still open. Still watching. "What do you think we found down there?" Marcus asked quietly. Atlas's ears twitched, but he didn't answer. He just kept watching, the way he always did, protecting, waiting, knowing something Marcus didn't. Outside, the rain continued to fall. And somewhere deep in the house, something settled with a soft groan, not threatening, just acknowledging. This broken place, this $50 gamble, this collapsing estate on a forgotten mountain, it was theirs now. And whatever secrets Captain Edwin Harrow had left behind, Marcus and Atlas were about to uncover them. Morning came gray and cold. Marcus woke to Atlas licking his face, the dog's breath warm against his skin. For a moment, he forgot where he was, then reality crashed back. No bed, no heat, no running water, just a collapsing house and a dwindling bag of dog food. He sat up, every muscle aching from sleeping on the floor. Atlas was already by the door, tail wagging expectantly. "All right, boy," Marcus groaned, standing. "Let's see what we're working with." In daylight, the house looked simultaneously better and worse. The view from the ridge was stunning. Endless forest stretching to snow-capped peaks in the distance. But the structure itself was a disaster zone. The collapsed section was even more extensive than he'd thought, and several support beams showed signs of rot. Marcus walked the perimeter, making mental notes. He'd need tarps, lumber, about $1,000 he didn't have, and skills he'd have to learn on YouTube. Atlas, meanwhile, had other priorities. The dog went straight to the basement door, scratching insistently. "We're not breaking in there without a key," Marcus said. "We need to—" Atlas barked 3 times. Sharp, urgent. Marcus sighed. "Fine. But if we break something valuable, I'm blaming you." Back in the basement, Marcus examined the locked section of wall more carefully. The keyhole was definitely military grade, probably installed when Harrow built the house, which meant the key could be anywhere. He searched the workshop systematically. Toolboxes, drawers, under the workbench. Nothing. Then Atlas started digging at a corner of the concrete floor. Not scratching, digging, like he'd found something buried. Marcus pulled him back. "Easy. You'll hurt your paws." But when he looked closer, he saw it. A small section of concrete that didn't quite match the rest. Newer, smoother. And when he tapped it with a wrench, it sounded hollow. Heart racing, Marcus grabbed a hammer and chisel from the workbench. It took 20 minutes of careful chipping before the false concrete gave way, revealing a small metal box beneath. Inside the box, a single key on a tarnished chain, and a folded letter. Marcus's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. The handwriting was precise, military crisp. If you're reading this, then you've already started asking questions. Good. That means you're smarter than the vultures who've been circling this place for years. The key opens more than a door. It opens truth. I flew 23 years for Uncle Sam. Some of those flights you'll never find in any logbook. Some of that cargo you'll never read about in history books. And some of the gold I moved, it was never meant to arrive where the paperwork said. I didn't steal it. I saved it. From men who would have used it to fund things that would have made you sick. If you found this, you're probably desperate. I was too, once. That's why I understand. Use what you find wisely. And whatever you do, don't trust Donovan Cole. His father was one of the men I took it from. Captain Edwin Harrow. Marcus read it twice, then a third time, his mind racing. Gold? Hidden by a pilot who flew classified missions? He looked at Atlas, who sat perfectly still. Amber eyes fixed on the locked wall section. You ready, boy? Atlas's tail thumped once against the concrete. Marcus inserted the key. It turned smoothly, despite decades of disuse. Locks clicked. Mechanisms groaned. Then, with a sound like a sigh, a section of the wall swung inward on hidden hinges. Behind it was a storage room. Small, climate-controlled by some kind of military-grade system still running on emergency power, and lining every wall, stacked floor to ceiling in perfect rows, were gold bars. Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. Each bar gleamed dully under the emergency lighting, stamped with markings he didn't recognize, definitely not U.S. Treasury. Atlas walked in calmly, as if he'd expected this all along. He sat in the center of the room, looking back at Marcus with an expression that seemed to say, "See? I told you something was here." Marcus finally found his voice. Jesus Christ. He stepped inside on shaky legs and picked up one of the bars. It was heavier than he expected, maybe 20 pounds. He counted the rows, did rough mental math, felt his stomach drop. There had to be hundreds of them, maybe 1,000. And if each bar was worth even a conservative estimate, he set the bar down carefully. Hands trembling. This wasn't $50 anymore. This was generational wealth. This was life-changing. This was dangerous. A sound from upstairs made both of them freeze. Marcus's military training kicked in instantly. He hit the hidden door's close mechanism, grabbed Atlas, and moved to the stairs, listening. Voices. Male. Confident. Not friendly. Told you he'd come back, one was saying. Cole wants this place searched top to bottom. For what? Another replied. It's just a condemned shithole. Not what he says. Old man Harrow had something valuable. Cole's dad. Spent 30 years looking for it. Marcus's blood ran cold. He pulled Atlas close, hand on the dog's muzzle, keeping him silent. The footsteps moved through the first floor, then started toward the basement stairs. Check down there, someone ordered. Marcus had seconds to decide. Fight or hide. 2 men, maybe 3. He was unarmed, except for a wrench, but he wasn't alone. He looked at Atlas and made 3 quick hand signals, the ones they'd used overseas for enemy, quiet, and protect. The dog's entire body changed. Muscles coiled, breathing slowed, eyes locked on the basement door. The first man appeared at the top of the stairs, crew cut, tactical vest under his jacket. Definitely not a lawyer. Atlas exploded into motion. The man barely had time to shout before 90 pounds of Belgian Malinois hit him center mass, driving him backward into the wall with a sickening thud. He crumpled. The second man tried to draw something from his jacket. Marcus was already moving. He grabbed the wrench and swung low, connecting with the man's knee. The man screamed and went down. "Call them off!" A third voice shouted from upstairs. Cole said, "No violence!" Marcus whistled. Atlas released the first man immediately and returned to his side, not a hair out of place. The third man appeared older, in an expensive suit, hands raised. "Easy. We're just doing our jobs. Your job is breaking and entering?" Marcus's voice was steel. "We're property inspectors. Cole sent us to—" "Get out!" Marcus pointed the wrench at the stairs. "Before I let my dog finish what he started." Atlas growled, showing teeth. The 3 men scrambled for the exit, the injured one limping badly. Through the window, Marcus watched them pile into a gray sedan and speed down the mountain road, kicking up mud and gravel. His hands were shaking. Adrenaline dumped through his system like ice water. Atlas pressed against his leg, grounding him, the way he always did when the panic threatened to take over. "Good boy," Marcus whispered, sinking to his knees and bugging the dog. "Good boy." But they both knew this was just the beginning. Cole knew something was here. He'd known all along. That's why he wanted the property so badly. That's why he was willing to escalate this quickly. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Maggie. She answered on the second ring. "Marcus, you okay?" "No, I need help." "What happened?" He hesitated. How much could he tell her? Cole sent men to search the house. They broke in. Atlas handled it. A long pause. Then, "I'll make some calls. In the meantime, you need a lawyer. A real one. Not some public defender. I can't afford. You let me worry about that. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone else in. And, Marcus?" Her voice softened. "Whatever you found in that house, whatever Harrow left behind, be careful. Men like Cole don't give up." "I know." After hanging up, Marcus went back to the basement. Atlas followed, and together they stood at the hidden door. Marcus looked at the dog. "We're in deep now, aren't we?" Atlas's tail wagged once. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly, "but at least we're in it together." He opened the hidden room one more time, just to make sure he hadn't imagined it. The gold bars gleamed back at him, silent and heavy, with secrets Captain Harrow had carried to his grave. Secrets that were now Marcus's burden. And somewhere down the mountain, Donovan Cole was already planning his next move. The storm, Marcus realized, had only just begun. That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He sat in the dark study with Atlas beside him, wrench in one hand, flashlight in the other, watching the driveway through the broken window. Every sound made his muscles tense, every branch scraping the roof, every gust of wind, every distant engine. The PTSD symptoms he'd managed to keep at bay for weeks came roaring back. Shadows became insurgents. The creaking house became collapsing buildings. His breath came too fast, too shallow. Atlas sensed it immediately. The dog climbed into his lap, all 90 pounds of him, and pressed his weight against Marcus's chest. Grounding pressure, reassuring warmth. Marcus buried his face in the dog's fur and forced himself to count breaths. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Slowly, the panic receded. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he whispered. Atlas licked his chin once, then settled back into watchful stillness. Morning came with unexpected visitors. Marcus heard the vehicles before he saw them, multiple engines, coming up the mountain road in convoy. He grabbed the wrench and positioned himself by the window, Atlas at his side. But these weren't Cole's men. The lead vehicle was Maggie's battered pickup. Behind her came 2 more trucks, one hauling lumber, the other carrying what looked like tools and supplies. 6 people climbed out, all ages, all dressed in work clothes. Maggie knocked on the door. "Marcus, it's us. Open up." He did. Stunned, she grinned at his expression. "Pine Bluff Veterans Alliance. We take care of our own, remember? This is Tom, Sarah, Bill, David, Rita, and Carlos. We've got supplies, we've got skills, and we've got a whole Saturday free." Tom, a barrel-chested man in his 60s with a gray beard, extended his hand. "Army. 72nd Engineer Company. I can frame anything that doesn't move." Sarah, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and paint-stained overalls, added, "Air Force. Civil Engineering. I specialize in making things not collapse." Marcus was speechless. I don't have money to pay you." "Didn't ask for money," Bill said gruffly. He was thin and wiry. Maybe 70. with hands that looked like they'd built half the county. Marine Corps. Your family now. Atlas barked his approval and immediately started making friends, going from person to be petted. They worked all day. Tom and Bill stabilized the collapsed section with temporary supports. Sarah assessed the foundation and declared it surprisingly solid, actually. David, a quiet man who'd served in Iraq, helped Marcus clear debris, while Rita and Carlos patched the roof with tarps and salvaged shingles. Maggie pulled Marcus aside mid-afternoon. I called a friend lawyer named Janet Reeves. She's former JAG, handles property disputes. She'll be here tomorrow. I still can't pay. She works pro bono for vets. Just talk to her. By sunset, the house looked almost livable. The roof was patched. The windows were boarded securely. The front porch was reinforced and safe to walk on. As they packed up, Tom clapped Marcus on the shoulder. You need anything else? You call. Cole's got money, but we've got numbers. After they left, Marcus stood on the newly repaired porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. Atlas sat beside him, tail wagging contentedly. For the first time since the auction, Marcus felt something dangerous. Hope. The lawyer arrived the next morning in a sensible sedan, carrying a leather briefcase that had seen better days. Janet Reeves was in her late 50s, black, with close-cropped silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a navy blazer and moved with the confidence of someone who'd faced down generals. Marcus Reid, she extended a hand. Maggie tells me you've had some trouble. They sat in the cleared kitchen while Atlas dozed nearby. Marcus laid out everything. The auction, Cole's immediate interest, the break-in, the hidden room. He hesitated before mentioning the gold, but something in Janet's steady gaze told him he could trust her. Captain Harrow left a letter, he said quietly. And he left assets. Significant ones. How significant? Marcus met her eyes. Hundreds of gold bars. Maybe over $300 million worth. To her credit, Janet's expression barely changed. She simply nodded and made a note. That explains Cole's desperation. His father, Richard Cole, was investigated in the 72nds for embezzlement from classified government programs. Nothing stuck, but the rumor was someone moved gold assets before the auditors arrived. Harrow. Apparently. Janet leaned back. The question is, who owns that gold now? If it was government property, technically, it's still government property, regardless of how it got here. But if Harrow legally acquired it through channels we can prove. She drummed her fingers on the table. We need to see those gold bars. I need photos, serial numbers, markings, everything. Marcus led her to the basement. When he opened the hidden room, Janet stood in silence for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. Sweet Jesus, she whispered. They spent 2 hours documenting everything. Each bar bore markings. Republic of Vietnam, 1,975. Emergency reserve. This is Vietnamese gold, Janet said, voice hushed. Probably evacuated during the fall of Saigon, which means it legally belonged to the South Vietnamese government, which no longer exists. There's a case to be made that whoever preserved it has rightful claim, especially after 50 years. Cole's going to fight this. Cole's going to lose. Steel entered her voice. We'll need to report this to the Treasury Department. There's no avoiding that. But we do it on our terms, with documentation, with Harrow's letter establishing intent and custody. Atlas suddenly lifted his head, ears forward. Then came the sound of vehicles, multiple vehicles grinding up the mountain road. Janet moved to the window. That's not Cole. That's the county sheriff. Marcus's stomach dropped. Someone called them. Of course they did. Janet straightened her blazer. Let me handle this. They met the sheriff on the porch, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s named Dale Hutchins, with a face weathered by decades of mountain winters. He was accompanied by 2 deputies, and, to Marcus's disgust, Donovan Cole. "Mr. Reid," Hutchins said formally, "we've received reports of break-ins, assault with a deadly animal, and potential theft of government property." "That's a lie," Marcus started, but Janet cut him off. "Sheriff Hutchins, I'm Janet Reeves, Mr. Reid's attorney." Hutchins hesitated. "We don't have a warrant. This is an inquiry." "Then Mr. Reid isn't required to speak with you. However, in the interest of cooperation, I'll inform you that we're in the process of reporting the discovery of historical assets to the Treasury Department. All documentation will be made available through proper legal channels." Cole stepped forward. "That gold was stolen from my family." "Mr. Cole," Janet interrupted, "unless you can produce documentation proving your ownership of assets you've claimed don't exist, I suggest you stop speaking." Cole's face reddened. "Sheriff, arrest this man for assault. He sicked his dog on my employees." "Who broke into his property?" Janet countered. "Which constitutes both trespassing and attempted burglary. I have photos of the damage they caused. Should we file those charges, Sheriff?" Hutchins looked between them, clearly tired of being used as a pawn. "This is getting out of hand. Mr. Reid, I'm ordering you to keep that gold secured until the Treasury Department arrives. Don't touch it, don't move it, and for God's sake, don't sell it." "Understood," Marcus said quietly, and Cole Hutchins turned to the developer. "If I get one more call about harassment or property violations, I'll arrest you. Clear?" Cole's jaw worked, but he nodded. After they left, Janet leaned against the porch railing. "He's going to escalate. They always do when they're losing. What do we do?" She looked at him with something like respect. "We fight, and we don't blink first." That night, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. He walked the property with Atlas, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Everything seemed normal until Atlas stopped suddenly, staring into the trees. A red dot appeared on a distant trunk. Laser sight. Someone was out there, tracking them with a rifle. Marcus dropped flat, pulling Atlas down with him. His heart hammered. Military instinct screamed at him to move, to find cover. The dot disappeared. A message. Not an assassination attempt, but a threat. "We can reach you whenever we want." Marcus lay in the wet grass, arms around Atlas, forcing himself to breathe. This was war now. Different terrain, different enemy, but war nonetheless. And he'd survived war before. He whistled softly. Atlas rose and followed him back to the house, both of them moving in tactical silence, scanning the darkness. Inside, Marcus locked every door and window. Then he sat in the dark with his phone, composing a text to Janet. "They're watching the house. Armed surveillance." Her reply came instantly. "Get cameras. Motion sensors. I'll fast-track the Treasury report. We're running out of time." Marcus looked at Atlas, who'd positioned himself by the door, ready to defend their position. "We're not giving up," Marcus said quietly. "You hear me? We're not running." Atlas's tail thumped once against the floor. Agreement, solidarity, trust. Outside, the mountain was silent, but in that silence, Marcus heard what Harrow must have heard for decades. The weight of secrets, the price of doing the right thing, and the knowledge that some battles never truly end. They just wait for the next warrior to pick them up. The cameras arrived 2 days later, delivered by a quiet man named Vincent Chen, who'd served in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment. He installed them without being asked, refusing payment, then left with nothing more than a handshake and a "Semper Fi" that made Marcus's throat tight. By week's end, The property had transformed into something resembling a forward operating base. Motion sensors lined the perimeter. Trail cameras covered every approach. Marcus had created a simple alert system using his phone if anything larger than a deer crossed the property line, he'd know. Atlas approved. The dogs seemed more relaxed, knowing their flanks were covered. But the surveillance footage revealed something disturbing. Every night between 2 and 4 a.m., vehicles passed slowly on the access road below the property. Different makes and models, but always the same pattern. Slow roll. Pause. Continue. Reconnaissance runs. Cole was planning something. Marcus spent his days diving deeper into Captain Harrow's past. The basement workshop contained decades of meticulous records, not just flight logs, but personal journals, photographs, and correspondence that painted a picture of a man caught between duty and conscience. One journal entry, dated March 1975, stopped Marcus cold. They ordered us to evacuate essential personnel from Saigon, but I saw the manifests. Half the cargo bay was reserved for gold bars. Vietnamese treasury reserves were located by men in expensive suits who'd never worn a uniform in their lives. They said it was for safekeeping. I knew what it really was. Theft dressed up as patriotism. Today I made a choice. I told the crew the port engine was showing stress fractures, ordered an emergency landing in Thailand. While the mechanics investigated, I had my loadmaster swap cargo pallets. The gold went into storage. Canned goods and medical supplies went to Saigon. The suits never checked, too busy drinking at the hotel bar. By the time anyone noticed the weight discrepancy, we were wheels up. And the real gold was already on a Navy transport I'd arranged with a friend who owed me his life. Richard Cole threatened me when he figured it out months later. Said his investors wanted their property back. I told him they could take it up with the Vietnamese government, which no longer existed. He said I'd stolen government assets. I said he'd stolen from a dying nation. He's been watching me ever since, waiting. But he'll never find it. I made sure of that. Marcus set the journal down, hands shaking. Harrow hadn't stolen the gold. He'd prevented it from being stolen. And he'd spent the next 40 years protecting it from men like Richard Cole. Men who saw war and suffering as business opportunities. Atlas nudged his hand, sensing the emotional weight. He was like us, Marcus whispered to the dog. Trying to do the right thing in a world that punishes you for it. He continued reading, finding more details. Harrow had meticulously documented every bar. Serial numbers, weight, assay marks. He'd even tracked what the gold should have been used for refugee resettlement, medical supplies, rebuilding programs that never happened because men like Richard Cole had diverted the funds. But there was more. Hidden in a locked drawer Marcus had to force open, he found a second letter, this one addressed to whoever finds the truth. I know I should have turned this over to proper authorities. But I watched those proper authorities abandon our allies, pocket relief funds, and decorate the men who orchestrated the thefts. So I made a different choice. This gold represents 40,000 Vietnamese refugees who should have received support. It represents medical programs that were defunded. It represents promises America made and then broke. If you're reading this, you probably need it. Most people don't stumble onto abandoned properties by accident. They stumble because they're desperate. Use it to help others. That's all I ask. Help the people the system forgot. And if Cole comes for it, and he will remember this. His father died bitter and broke, still searching. Don't let him win by becoming like him. Choose honor, even when it costs you everything. Edwin Harrow, Captain, USAF, Ret. Marcus pressed the letter to his chest, eyes burning. This wasn't just gold. It was a mission. A final order from a man who'd carried the weight alone for decades. And now it was Marcus's to carry. A sound from upstairs made both Marcus and Atlas freeze. Footsteps. Light, deliberate, trying to be quiet. Someone was in the house. Marcus grabbed the wrench and moved silently up the basement stairs, Atlas flowing beside him like a shadow. They'd practiced this silent movement, tactical spacing, non-verbal communication. The footsteps moved through the kitchen toward the study. Marcus signaled Atlas. Flank left. The dog obeyed instantly, circling through the dining room while Marcus approached from the hallway. He rounded the corner fast, wrench raised, and found himself face to face with a woman in her 70s, holding a photograph and crying. She screamed. Marcus dropped the wrench. Atlas skidded to a stop, tail wagging uncertainly. "Jesus!" Marcus gasped. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" The woman pressed a hand to her chest, breathing hard. She was small, maybe 5'2", with white hair in a neat bun and warm brown skin that spoke of Southeast Asian heritage. She wore a simple blue cardigan and practical shoes, and her hands shook as she held up the photograph defensively. "I'm sorry," she said in accented English. The door was open. "I just wanted to see." She looked around the study, tears streaming down her face. This was Eddie's house. Captain Harrow. I needed to see it one more time. Marcus lowered his hands slowly. "You knew him? He saved my life." She sat heavily in the old armchair, still clutching the photo. "My name is Lin Wen. 50 years ago, Captain Harrow smuggled my family out of Saigon in the cargo hold of his plane. We were not on the manifest. We were not supposed to be there. But he hid us, risked his career, his freedom, everything." She held out the photograph. It showed a much younger version of herself standing with Captain Harrow beside a C-130. She couldn't have been more than 20. Harrow's arm was around her shoulders, protective, brotherly. "He visited me every year," Lynn continued softly. "Helped me through school. Helped me start my restaurant in Portland. Never asked for anything. Just wanted to know I was safe." Her voice broke. "When he died, I couldn't even attend the funeral. I was in Vietnam visiting family. By the time I returned, this place was abandoned." Atlas approached her gently, resting his head on her knee. She stroked his fur with trembling hands. "I'm sorry for intruding," she said. "I heard someone had bought the house. I thought maybe I could see it one last time. Remember him?" Marcus knelt beside the chair. "Mrs. Nguyen, I need to tell you something. Captain Harrow left more than just a house. He told her everything. The gold, the letters, the mission." Lynn listened in silence, tears flowing freely. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. "He gave this to me 5 years ago," she said. "Told me to give it to whoever bought the house. I thought he was being sentimental. Old man talk." She handed it to Marcus. "I think he knew you were coming." The envelope was addressed simply, "To the veteran." Inside was a single page. "If Lynn gave you this, then you've already found the gold." "Good. That means you're trustworthy. She wouldn't have come otherwise. Here's what you need to know. Richard Cole died in 2018, but his son, Donovan, is worse. Smarter, more patient, more ruthless. He's been buying up the mountain piece by piece, waiting for me to die so he could finally search this property legally. But I made sure the county classified it as condemned, which meant only auction. Which meant someone desperate enough might actually want it. Someone like you. The gold isn't cursed, but it carries weight. Not just physical weight, moral weight. If you use it selfishly, it'll destroy you like it destroyed Richard Cole. But if you use it the way I intended, it'll give you something money can't buy. purpose. Lynn will help you. She knows people, has connections, understands what it means to start over with nothing. Trust the dog. He'll know who's lying. And when Cole makes his final move, and he will remember, he's not fighting for the gold. He's fighting for his father's ghost. That makes him predictable. Give him a chance to walk away. He won't take it. But you'll have done the right thing. That's all that matters in the end. Marcus looked at Lynn, who was watching him with knowing eyes. He planned all of this, Marcus said quietly. Every piece. Eddie was always good at chess, Lynn replied. He thought many moves ahead. She stood, steadying herself on the chair arm. I run a restaurant in Portland. Faux Lynn. Many of my employees are refugees, veterans, people who need second chances. If you need help understanding what to do with that gold, I can introduce you to people who survived because of Eddie's kindness. I'd like that, Marcus said. But first, Lynn added, her gentle expression hardening, we need to deal with Donovan Cole. He will not stop. Men like him never do. As if summoned, Atlas's ears suddenly pricked forward. He moved to the window. Body tense, a low growl building in his chest. Through the trees, Marcus saw them. 3 vehicles parked on the access road. Men getting out. Not bothering to hide anymore. They wore work vests and hard hats, carrying clipboards and cameras. But Marcus had been in enough combat zones to recognize a Reid when he saw one. His phone rang. Janet Reeves. Marcus, listen carefully, she said without preamble. Cole just filed an emergency petition claiming the property poses an imminent safety hazard. He's got a county inspector and a demolition crew en route. They're going to try to condemn the house with you still in it. They're already here. Do not engage physically. I'm 20 minutes out. Keep them off the property until I arrive. Marcus hung up and looked at Lynn. You should go. This might get ugly. I didn't survive the fall of Saigon to run from a corrupt developer, she said calmly. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling my nephew. He's a journalist, and I'm calling my daughter. She's with the FBI field office in Portland. The FBI? Lynn smiled thinly. Did I mention my family does well in America? Eddie made sure of that. Within minutes, the dynamics shifted. Lynn's nephew arrived first. A man in his 30s with a professional camera and press credentials. He began filming everything. The crew, the vehicles, the men trying to access the property. The inspector was a nervous man in his 50s who kept glancing at Cole's SUV for guidance. When he saw the camera, he froze. Sir, Lynn's nephew called out. Can you state your name? And the legal basis for this inspection? The inspector stammered. This is routine code enforcement. With a demolition crew? That seems unusual. Has the property owner been given proper notice? The inspector pulled out his phone and walked away, voice low and frantic. Donovan Cole finally stepped out of his SUV. He dropped the polished businessman facade. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by work clothes and boots. His face was flushed with anger, barely held in check. Mr. Reid, he shouted, this structure is a public hazard. We're here to make it safe. Marcus stood on the reinforced porch, Atlas at his side. I have an engineer's report saying the foundation is sound. You're trespassing. I have a county order. That you filed this morning using falsified safety reports. Janet Reeves's voice cut through the tension. Her sedan pulled up the driveway, and she emerged with a briefcase and an expression that could cut steel. I've already filed an emergency injunction. Any work done on this property before the hearing is illegal. Cole's jaw clenched. You can't stop progress. I can stop fraud. Janet walked past him, without breaking stride. Marcus, don't say another word. Everyone else, leave this property immediately, or face trespassing charges. For a moment, Cole looked like he might explode. His hands clenched into fists. His face turned an alarming shade of red. Then Atlas stepped forward. Not aggressive, not threatening, just present. The dog's amber eyes locked onto Cole with the unwavering focus of a predator who'd identified a target. Cole took a step back. The movement was unconscious, instinctive the same way men stepped back from armed soldiers. "This isn't over," he said, voice low. "No," Lin Wen said, stepping beside Marcus. "It's not. But it will be soon. And when it is, you'll lose. Just like your father did." Cole's eyes widened in recognition. "You're the refugee, the one he saved. One of thousands he saved," Lin corrected. "While your father counted money stolen from the dying." Cole climbed back into his SUV and slammed the door. The convoy pulled away, leaving deep ruts in the mud. After they left, the 3 humans and 1 dog stood in silence. Then Janet laughed sharp and surprised. "Well," she said, "that was dramatic." Lin smiled. Eddie would have enjoyed it. Marcus knelt beside Atlas, running his hands through the dog's fur. The Malinois had diffused the situation without a single bark, just by being exactly what he was. A warrior who'd seen real threats and knew Cole wasn't one of them. "Good boy." That evening, Lin made them dinner using supplies she'd brought from her restaurant. The old kitchen filled with the scent of star anise, ginger, and beef broth, simmering in a pot she'd salvaged from the cabinets. They sat around a card table Marcus had set up, eating pho, while Lin told them stories about Captain Harrow, about the time he'd smuggled 12 orphans out of a combat zone, about how he'd spent his retirement flying medical supplies to remote villages, about the garden he'd maintained behind the house now overgrown, where he'd grown Vietnamese herbs so Lin would feel at home during her visits. "He never married," Lin said softly. "He said the sky was his first love, and helping people was his second. There wasn't room for a third." "Sounds lonely," Marcus said. "He chose it?" Lin replied. "Not everyone who's alone is lonely." Marcus understood that better than he wanted to admit. Later, after Lin left with promises to return with proper food the next day, Marcus and Janet sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "The Treasury hearing is in 3 days," Janet said. "We have Harrow's documentation, Lin's testimony, and my legal brief. We're in good shape. But," she sighed, "but Cole has resources. He'll try something before then. Something desperate. Let him." Marcus's voice was quiet steel. "I'm done running from bullies." Atlas, lying between them, thumped his tail in agreement. Janet stood to leave, then paused. "Marcus, why did you buy this place? Really? You had to know $50 wouldn't be enough." He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the dark forest. "I didn't buy it for the house. I bought it because it was something. When you have nothing, even a condemned property feels like hope. And now I know what Harrow felt. This weight, this responsibility." He looked at Atlas. "But I'm not carrying it alone." After Janet drove away, Marcus walked the property one more time. Atlas ranged ahead, checking the perimeter, nose to the ground. The cameras showed nothing unusual. The motion sensors were quiet. But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were in the eye of the storm. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Cole wouldn't accept defeat gracefully. The Treasury Department would complicate things, and somewhere out there, people were watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. But tonight, standing on land that was legally his, with a dog who trusted him and a mission he finally understood, Marcus Reid felt something he hadn't felt since before the war. He felt like he mattered, like his life had purpose beyond just surviving, and that was worth fighting for. Atlas returned from his patrol and sat beside him, looking up expectantly. "Ready for bed, boy?" The dog's tail wagged. Together, they walked back to the house, the one Marcus had bought for $50, and Atlas had made into a fortress. Tomorrow, they'd face whatever came next. But tonight, they were home. The next morning brought rain, cold, relentless, turning the mountain roads into rivers of mud. Marcus woke to the sound of it hammering against the patched roof. A rhythmic percussion that would have been soothing under different circumstances. Atlas was already awake, sitting by the window, ears forward. Alert, but not alarmed. Marcus checked the camera feeds on his phone. Nothing unusual. Just rain and gray dawn light filtering through the pines. He was making coffee on the camping stove when his phone rang. Unknown number. "Reid," he answered cautiously. "Mr. Reid, this is Special Agent Sarah Patel, FBI Portland Field Office." The voice was professional, clipped. "Lynn Nguyen's daughter. I need to meet with you this morning regarding your property and the assets discovered therein." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "Am I under investigation?" "No. But the gold you found is. We need to establish provenance before the Treasury hearing. May I come up?" Ah, how do I know you're actually FBI? You don't. Which is why I'm bringing Lynn, and why I'm calling instead of just showing up. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up before Marcus could respond. Atlas tilted his head, picking up on Marcus's tension. "Company coming," Marcus muttered. "The official kind." He spent the next hour cleaning, which mostly meant shoving debris into corners and making sure the paths through the house were clear. When the sedan pulled up, Lynn emerged first, holding an umbrella and carrying what looked like a thermal container. Behind her came a woman in her early 40s, black, with close-cropped hair and sharp eyes. She wore a dark suit under a waterproof jacket and moved with the controlled precision of someone who'd spent time in the military. "Sarah Patel." She introduced herself, showing credentials. "Counterintelligence Division. And before you ask, yes, I served. Army CID, 2004 to 2010. Marcus relaxed slightly. "Marines, 2008 to 2015. Afghanistan? 2 tours. She nodded with the quiet acknowledgement veterans shared. "My mother says you're trustworthy. That matters more than you'd think in my line of work." Lynn handed Marcus the thermal container. They sat in the cleared dining room while Sarah laid out her investigation. 3 weeks ago," she began, "we received an anonymous tip about Donovan Cole's business practices. Money laundering, tax fraud, falsified property assessments. The tip included financial records going back 15 years. "Anonymous?" Marcus asked. Sarah smiled thinly. "Not really. We traced it to a paralegal in Cole's firm who'd been skimming documents for years, waiting for the right moment. Your property purchase was that moment. Why? Because Cole's been trying to acquire this ridge for a decade. He's buried millions into it, buying surrounding properties, bribing inspectors, filing frivolous lawsuits against previous owners. This was never about the gold. He didn't even know it existed until recently." "Then what was it about?" "Water rights." Sarah pulled out a map. "This ridge feeds 3 major aquifers. Cole's development company needs them for a luxury resort he's planning. But this property sits right in the middle. Without it, the resort is impossible." Marcus stared at the map, pieces clicking into place. "Including arson." Sarah's expression darkened. "We have evidence he hired someone to burn down the previous owner's barn 3 years ago. The owner was elderly, got spooked, died of a heart attack 2 weeks later. Property went into probate limbo until this auction. Jesus! The gold is secondary to him. But once he learned about it, and he has sources in the county office, it became personal. His father spent 40 years searching for it. Died convinced Harrow had stolen it. Cole wants to prove his father was right. Lynn spoke quietly. Richard Cole was a thief who dressed like a businessman. His son is the same. Sarah nodded. Which brings me to why I'm here. The Treasury Department will authenticate the gold, but they'll also want to know if it's connected to any ongoing crimes. If I can establish that Cole is attempting to illegally acquire property specifically because of assets he has no legal claim to, it strengthens your position significantly. What do you need from me? Access to Harrow's documents. Everything. Letters, manifests, photographs. I need to build a timeline proving Harrow legally intercepted that gold and that Cole's family was attempting to steal it. Marcus led her to the basement. When she saw the hidden room, her professional composure cracked for just a moment. "Holy hell," she whispered. They spent 3 hours going through everything. Sarah photographed documents, made notes, and occasionally stopped to ask Marcus questions about Harrow's service record or the house's layout. Atlas stayed close the entire time, watching her with calm assessment. When she reached down to pet him, he allowed it his version of approval. "Your dog is remarkably well trained," she observed. "He's the reason I'm still alive," Marcus said simply. Understanding flickered in her eyes. "PTSD? Yeah, how bad?" Marcus hesitated. He didn't talk about this with strangers, but something about Sarah's directness, her veteran's understanding, made him answer honestly. "Some days I can't leave the house. Some days loud noises put me on the floor. Some days I wake up convinced I'm still in Fallujah." He looked at Atlas. "But he knows. Before the panic hits, before the flashback takes over, he knows. Grounds me. Brings me back." Sarah nodded slowly. "My brother has TBI from an IED. His service dog does the same thing." She stood, brushing dust from her pants. "The men who came here to intimidate you, the ones Atlas confronted, did you know one of them is a registered felon? Assault charges. Cole hired him anyway, to scare me off. Or worse." Sarah's voice hardened. "I'm putting protection on this property. Unmarked surveillance. If Cole's men come back, we'll have them on federal charges. I don't need... It's not negotiable." Her tone left no room for argument. "My mother cares about you, which means I care about you. And more importantly, you're now a material witness in a federal investigation. That makes your safety my responsibility." After Sarah and Lynn left, Marcus stood in the hidden room, staring at the gold bars that had changed his life in ways he was still processing. Atlas nudged his hand. "What would you do, boy?" Marcus asked quietly. "If this was your mission?" The dog looked at him with those knowing amber eyes. Then he walked to Harrow's workbench and sat, staring at a photograph Marcus had glanced at, but not really examined. It showed Harrow standing with a group of Vietnamese children in front of a newly built school. The sign above the door read, "Hope Academy, funded by anonymous donor." Harrow had already been using the gold, quietly, carefully, for exactly what he'd intended. Marcus picked up the photo. On the back, in Harrow's precise handwriting, "This is what it was for. This is what it should always be for." The mission crystallized in Marcus's mind with sudden, perfect clarity. He wasn't meant to keep the gold. He was meant to finish what Harrow started. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Final warning. Leave or burn with it." Marcus showed it to Atlas. "What do you think?" The dog's response was to walk to the door, look back at Marcus, and bark once. Translation: "Let them try." Marcus smiled grimly. "Yeah, that's what I thought too." He forwarded the text to Sarah, then began photographing every page of Harrow's journals, every document, every piece of evidence. If Cole wanted to escalate, Marcus would be ready, but he wouldn't be fighting for himself anymore. He'd be fighting for Lynn and the thousands like her who Harrow had helped, for the veterans who'd come home to nothing, for everyone the system had forgotten. This wasn't about $50 or $300 million. It was about honoring a promise made by a man who died alone, carrying secrets that should have been celebrated. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the mountain clean, and in the hidden room beneath a collapsing house, a homeless veteran and his loyal dog stood guard over a fortune meant to change the world. The storm was coming, but they'd be ready.